Hey, how's it going? My name is Wes. Welcome back to the 25th lesson already. This is the last lesson of this first chapter. In today's lesson, we are going to look at the introduction to tildes. And in today's lesson, we will see how tildes are being used to influence how a word or a letter is pronounced. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into today's lesson, Introduction to Tildes. Alright, so let's look at an example sentence to see how we use the tilde in Spanish. So here we have our example sentence, I want a coffee. And we already learned how to say I want, which is yo quiero, and a coffee was un café. So yo quiero un café, I want a coffee.
Yo quiero un café. Yo quiero un café.
Now, as you can see in the sentence, the letter E of café has a tilde, and in English we call a tilde an accent. In Spanish, we call it a tilde. And in the English language, accents are used sometimes. However, in the Spanish language, accents are used very often, very frequently. And that is because of a couple of reasons. And today I want to get into some of those reasons. Alright, so now that we have a refresher of what tildes look like again, I want to go over the 6 letters with which these tildes are used very often. And the first one is the letter A. For example, in árbol, which means tree. Not the letter tree, but like a tree outside in the forest.
Árbol. Árbol. A. A.
So the letter A often has a tilde. Now, the other letter that also often has a tilde is the letter E, as we saw before in café.
Café. Café. E. E.
So the A and the E, and then also the I, also often you will find that the letter I has a tilde on top as well. So instead of a regular dot on the I, it has this tilde. For example, in the word país, which means country in Spanish.
País. País. Y. Y.
You will also often find a tilde on the letter O. For example, in
Corazón.
which means heart in Spanish.
Corazón. O. O.
The 5th letter on which you will often find a tilde is the letter U. And we already came across this in, for example, the word tú, which means you in formal.
Tú. Tú. U. U.
And then the last letter which often uses a tilde is this N with this tilde on top. And actually, as we learned, this is not a regular N, but this is actually a separate individual letter, which is called the ñ. So for example, in the word niño.
Niño. Niño. Ñ. Ñ.
And as you can see here, a tilde does not only mean a mark that is a little bit sidewards, but a tilde really is any accent on a letter. So pretty much a tilde just means a accent, whatever accent that is. Alright, so now we know the 6 letters which are very often or commonly used in combination with tildes. So the A, E, I, O, U, and N. So what I want to show you in this lesson is one of the main reasons why tildes are being used in the Spanish language, how they are different from when we use them in English, and how we can use them to indicate or to show how a word should be pronounced. Alright, so let's look at an example to explain myself a bit better. So, tildes in Spanish are used mostly to put focus or stress on the pronunciation of a specific word or letter. So in this example, él habla muy rápido. He talks very fast. We see that there's 2 tildes, one on the letter E at the beginning and one on the A of rápido. And as you might be able to hear, there's a certain way that these words are pronounced, especially the parts that have the tilde. So instead of saying, for example, if you look at the word rápido, I don't say rapido, but I say rápido. And that is because the tilde is on the A here and not on the I or the O. And so because the rápido has that tilde on the A, that's where I put the stress or the focus. So it's not él habla muy rápido, but it's él habla muy rápido. And the same thing goes for él, because él with a tilde means he, But if I would write el without a tilde, it would actually have a different meaning. And this is actually very important to understand because depending on if we do or do not use a tilde, the word can actually have a different meaning. So el with the tilde means he, and el without the tilde means the. Now in this lesson, because this is an introduction to tildes, I don't want to dive too deep into this specific topic, so don't worry too much about that right now, we'll get to that later. But what I really want you to focus on in this lesson is understanding that the use of tildes can have an effect on pronunciation. So depending on where you place the tilde, the accent or the stress in a word differs. So let's look at some examples. So for example, we have sábado or we have sábado.
Sábado. Sábado.
You notice the difference in pronunciation there? Sábado, sábado.
Sábado. Sábado.
Because we put the accent or the tilde on a different place within the word, the accent or the pronunciation of the word also differs. And we can go over the other examples as well. But before we do, actually what I want you to do is to go over by them by yourself and to see if you can guess how to pronounce these words. So pause the video right here if you want to practice a little bit, and then you can resume if you're ready. Alright, so let's look at them together. So first of all, we had sábado or sábado. Then we have
Bebé.
or we can also say
Bebe. Bebé. Bebe.
so there's a slight difference there in where we place the stress. Then we have
Fácil.
or
Fácil. 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 Corazón. 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 Último. 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 Niño. Nino. Niño. Nino.
So from now on, every time you see a tilde on top of a letter, I want you to stop for a minute and think about how a word is likely to be pronounced. And mastering the accents in Spanish is actually one of the most difficult things to do as a non-native speaker. But if you really want to become fluent in Spanish, it is something that you really want to master. And the more you listen carefully to how other people around you say certain words, the more, of course, you will also improve yourself. So in this case, practice does make perfect. And that is actually already it for this introduction to tildes. In a later lesson, we will dive a bit deeper into tildes, because as I explained before, there's two different reasons why we use tildes. One is to know how we should pronounce things, which we just learned. And then we also use tildes because a word with or without a tilde can mean two different things, but we will get to that in a later lesson. And last but not least, I also want to share something important, which is that originally I planned to make only the first 25 lessons of this 200 lesson course for free and to keep the rest paid. But I've actually changed my mind on this and I've decided to release all 200 lessons for free here on YouTube. Why? Because I believe that everyone should have the chance to learn a new language, whether or not they can pay for it. Education should be free and I want to help as many people as I can. Now, what that means is that from now on, every week I'll be uploading one new video lesson here on YouTube. And here's the thing, if you don't want to wait for me to upload one video every week, then what you can do is you can join my Patreon. On Patreon, you'll get early access to the next 25 to 50 lessons, and your support will help me free up more of my time to create even more lessons and courses in other languages. As of right now, I am making all of these lessons in my evening hours and weekends, so every bit of support truly makes a difference. Think of it as leaving a small donation to help this project grow and to help more people around the world learn new languages. So if you want to support this project and you already want to see the next 25 to 50 lessons, then make sure to click on the link in the description, which will bring you to my Patreon page. Alright, that's the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single one of you. And of course, I hope to see you in lesson number 26, whether that's on Patreon or here on YouTube. Thank you and see you in the next lesson.